I'm Megha, and I have been living in Oroville for over 7 years now. And at the moment, I work with Matra.
Yeah. My name is Jisung. I'm volunteer. I'm working in Youth
My name is Madhu. I've been living in Norville for 11 years, soon 12. I've been working in YouthLink for a year.
Hey, I'm Aurore. So I'm in Oroville since almost 6 years. I'm Aurovilian since 2 years. And same, I'm working at YouthLink, and this is our first edition of CommuniTea.
So, how did you come to arrive to Orville?
Oh, it's a very, very interesting story. I was traveling with my mom, I think in 2004. My mom grew up in South India, and we were going around all the places where she had lived. And the last stop was in Chennai. And my cousin who lives in Chennai said, why don't you go do a day trip to Pondy? So both of us came to Pondy, and she connected us to someone in the ashram. So we had like this little bit of a tour of the ashram, but then he also got us to Oroville. And in 2004, it was of course very different. You couldn't make out a difference between like the city and the open fields. So you didn't know when you entered Oroville or when you exited it. But at some point, we reached Matri Mandir, and interestingly, there was no fence at that time. You could walk up to the banyan tree
Wow.
and sit there. So we went there. Of course, Matri Mandir was not completed at that time.
How long was that ago?
That was in 2004. Matri Mandir, I think they fully completed the inner chamber and all that in 2008. Yeah, so of course we couldn't go inside, but the banyan tree was a very, very powerful experience for me. It was almost like some kind of silence descended in that moment. And then I remember the whole day I was just whispering because I was like, I can't talk. But I think that was the seed and the first connection with Oroville. And then few years later, I moved to Bangalore. So that's when I started coming to Oroville on the weekends. And then eventually I came for a longer time to volunteer. And it always felt like home. I would read the Dream and the Charter, and I would be like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is it. This is how the world should be. So there was always this resonance with the idea of Oroville. So I kept coming. And few years later, I was like, this is the only place I think I can live because of the resonance that I was feeling with the idea. Of course, it was more intuitive and more in my subconscious than consciousness. So I don't think I really practically tried to do whatever I needed to join Oroville. But then things eventually happened, and here I am. And it has never been a surprise, actually, that when I came to Oroville, it was just kind of coming back home. So it's been a long journey to finally move here, but it's kind of always felt like home.
And since you are here, you have always worked in Matram, or you have experienced different like volunteering or...
Yeah, so when I came here, I came on a project, but that project didn't take off. It was not an Oroville project, but there was someone living here at that time who was doing it. And I was going to Matri Mandir every day. I always felt connected to Matri Mandir from the very beginning. So I used to go to the chamber every day, and then the people who were working at Matri Mandir at that time saw me, and they were like, hey, do you want to volunteer here? Which is when the other project that I had come for was kind of falling apart. And I was already looking for, should I stay here? Should I leave? What should I do? So I said, yeah, sure. So that's how I started working at Matri Mandir with the Access team. And I was there for 5 years until COVID. I mean, I worked with the Access team until COVID, and then I did other things in the chamber later. But also during my newcomer period, I think this is the beauty of Oroville, that you can actually do anything that you feel called to do. So I experimented a lot during my newcomer period. So Matri Mandir was a very stable space for me, but I worked for maybe a year or so at Oroville Papers. I worked for 2 years with Oroville Ambulance. Also tried out a bit with Bharat Nivas. I worked for a year with Unity Pavilion. Yeah, I think so, more or less that. And then Matram has been the place I've been working since last 2 years, or slightly more. Yeah. So Matri Mandir and Matram have been like these steady pillars in the 7 years, but I kind of also did a lot of other things.
And I have, maybe this is a little bit out of point, but
Sure.
at the time, nowadays, when we come to Oroville, it's very obvious you have to go visitor center and you have to walk through the path, and you can go not in the Matrimandir, viewer, the
Viewpoint, yeah.
viewpoint. But at the time, there's no visitor center and that kind of process.
In 2003-4 when I came, I'm not sure because I didn't go to the visitor center. We went directly to Matri Mandir and the banyan tree. But I came again in 2008 or 9, which is when the visitor center was very much there. Which is when actually for the first time I read the Dream and the Charter and connected to that for the first time. But I don't think there was the viewpoint walking path, at least not the path in the way it is. I do remember going to the viewing point in 2009 or 10. But I don't think it was so organized in the way that it is now.
I wonder, what is Matram exactly? Because I have a rough idea, but I don't know exactly what it is.
So Matram is a mental health counseling unit, and this was kind of envisioned by a person named Jerry, who's not in Oroville anymore, but he initiated this whole process, and there were a bunch of people, so there was a lot of exchange and how to even approach mental health in a place like Oroville. So it was not to bring mental health or counseling from the way it exists in the world, but to put it in context of how it fits into the life of an Orovillian, and how can that support people in the journey of their own life, but in this context. So I think it started in 2016, and the approach is still very much of supporting and resourcing people rather than giving them solutions per se, but to help people go through their journeys and hold them through that and help them find their own answers and connect them to themselves. But yes, mostly the work is in the area of mental health and that support. And I think it's a very beautiful balance of taking into consideration the whole spiritual angle of Oroville, the context of Oroville, but also kind of keeping to the professional and scientific approach of psychology and mental health. So I think it's a beautiful balance that the team eventually has managed to bring. Yeah.
And what do you do exactly in Matram?
So I joined when they were looking for someone to help with organization and management. Because until then the therapists were doing it, and it was kind of a bit, they needed someone separately to take care of all those things. So I started as half-time over there, and then when I joined them full-time, I decided to offer, so I have done a lot of work with clay and body on myself and in general. Even before I came to Oroville in Bangalore, I had a pottery studio, and we used to do a lot of self-work through clay. And I'm also a dancer, so I've also done a lot of body work from that point of view. So we were looking at also adding a non-verbal modality. So there can be verbal support, so more therapy in terms of sharing and counseling, but a lot of people are also dissociated with their bodies. So to kind of cover the entire range of support, we felt that it was also important to have some amount of non-verbal modalities, which is what I do, mostly with clay. And we are also looking at adding more people who are trained in body work and who can help with support through that. So we try to integrate different modalities and then kind of give a more holistic approach to what a person is needing. Yeah.
You say that you do mental work through clay. I can't picture how does the process go, like how do you do it, like, you know.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first experience of that was with myself when I started learning pottery, and pottery came to me very intuitively. One day I was just like, I need to learn pottery, and I went looking for. So I learned the technique, but I was given a lot of opportunities where I had the studio to myself, and I could just sit with clay and just work. And in my experience, what I felt was that, clay is something that we're all like, we've encountered. It's in a way us. So there's already a very intuitive connection to that medium. And I feel like the clay gives you a little bit of tangible experience of the subtler, non-tangible experiences that we have. For example, if you're not feeling centered, it's a very subtle feeling in the body that I feel a bit scattered, I'm feeling a bit off, something like that. But you can't really capture it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. It's just this sensation. So clay kind of gives you an extension into that, because when you sit with clay and if you are not centered, you will see that in how you're working. So it kind of responds to your state. For example, I had a student once who was working in a bank, and she would always come to class after her work and after a full day of banking, and she was always hyper and act like she couldn't relax or let go. So every time she would sit to center the clay, she would just not be able to do it. So then eventually we realized that she needed to just find another rhythm in her body before she touched clay. So then what we did was that she would come, she would sit for 15 minutes, she would slow down, she would just breathe, and then when she feels ready, she would move to clay. And her whole experience kind of changed with that. So, and clay also has a lot of link with breath, because it needs you to be gentle but quite firm. So how do you navigate those kind of things? And so breath also plays a very important role. So you have to align your breath with your movement, with working with clay. So it brings in these kind of elements that one would probably not catch very easily into your physical experience. And then when you have a physical experience of something like that, it is then easy to bring it into a subtler dimension. So not really going into the outcome of what you're making, but stay with the process. So when you're centering, what is your breath like, what is your posture like, you start feeling the tension in the body. How do you relax that? So you kind of start connecting with your body to connect with clay, and that includes all these different dimensions.
Nice.
You should come for a session.
Yeah,
I mean, just
definitely.
to try out like how that feels.
It looks really interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a very powerful medium, I feel. Yeah.
We can do a community pottery.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, it's possible.
Because we're calling this community.
Ah, community pottery.
I didn't attended your session, but I had an experience of the making pottery 1 day class, and at that time I felt it was pretty different from other things like drawing or carpentry.
Yeah.
Has different kind of feeling, and that kind of touching clay have something different from other things. So it was very good experience for me. So I want to try.
Yeah, sure. We can organize something.
I did clay one time in last school. And it wasn't clay with like a turning wheel or something. It was like directly making a statue, for example. Yeah, it was a statue. And it was really hard.
I will be really curious to try.
We should do it.
I
yeah.
did a lot of gardening, but clay never. And what you was describing about your client, like who is always,
Yeah.
I feel a bit like that. So for me, all the activity who can help me like to slow down
Yeah.
and like recenter, it's like
Yeah.
really, it's nice.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
really nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Before we speak more.
Is there something else that you would like to share about your connection with Auroville or your work at Matram?
I just feel a very, very deep resonance with Auroville and the idea of Auroville. And no matter what is going on with me, with others in the community, I think I just try to stay connected with the dream and the vision and the charter. And I think it's a good north star for me in life itself. And in that sense, I think Matram also holds that kind of space. I think we don't talk about it even within the team, but I feel as a team, somehow we've managed to reach a place where there's a lot of support. Nobody's trying to be better than the other. Everybody's helping each other. Anybody needs help, you're supported. There's a collective, and that collective is very beautiful and very positive. Without trying, without being like this is how things should be. It's just the people that we are has created this beautiful space of love and support and wanting to give whatever we have. So it's actually one of the most beautiful work experiences that I've ever had in my life, in terms of the team. There's a lot of understanding, like if you have a health issue, you have a family, something going on, nobody's ever questioning, nobody's ever counting. And there's a lot of innate responsibility within the team, within the members. So you feel very held and yet not managed or controlled. And that itself helps you support each other quite beautifully. And I mean, this is something I've been talking to a friend about in terms of structure. And I was saying that when we talk about structure, like I have a deep resistance to structure, and I was trying to understand why. But I realized the structure that most of us experience in life is created out of wanting to control or limit, because I think somewhere deep down it's based in fear. But I also feel that structure is something that you need to fly, some formation to take a leap. And I feel that kind of structure is missing. Maybe because we're not there yet, we've not figured it out. I haven't experienced it so much, but I'm really trying that. And in Matram, I think I experienced that. And I think that impacts deeply the community also. So I feel very happy to be there. And there's a lot of deep learning in that, even in how we build communities and how communities come into existence. And does it need to have these structures, or just by being who we are, or the inner work that we have done, when we come together, something beautiful emerges. And I think that is something you probably experience even at Youth Link. Whatever I've been seeing over the last few years is this very dynamic, and to even see everybody grow. So
If there is another project or program that you have been part, where you have find also this like structure and who have like helped you to grow even more, like as like therapist, but also as like just human being.
it's only in hindsight that I realized that the only long thread that has ever been existing in my life is this curiosity about who I really am. What am I? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to live? But I have encountered two people in my life who I feel deeply. I mean, there are a lot of people who've touched my life very, very deeply, but two people who kind of, in a way, stand out just because of who they are. And I met Chandresh, who's not from Auroville, about a decade ago. And then cut to like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I met in Auroville. And somehow I feel I was ready and he was ready. And when we met, he gave me everything I needed to fill a lot of gaps that were missing in my life, things that I was not able to see in my work before. And a lot of loose ends kind of started getting tied. And this is when I started realizing the amount of work Chandresh had done for me, because now I was understanding what's happening. So even in that context, everything started forming like this whole picture coming together, and dance and clay, all of it kind of became part of the picture. So we did a lot of work for a few months on just bringing stability back in my life, in terms of food, in terms of self-care, all of that. And then about 4 or 5 months later, I did something called a 42-day program, which was about holding an emotion to eventually bring the power in your own hand for the state you want to be in, rather than being impacted by everything that's happening outside of you. So it was not so much about the emotion as much about holding something unconditionally, which was a very, very powerful experience for me, because it really opened up my understanding of unconditionality. I think ever since we are kids, we are told about unconditionality from a perspective of self-sacrificing or giving till you have nothing left to give. But I realized unconditionality was basically the key to help you move beyond the conditioning, which means it allows you to look at a situation from a newer perspective. And then you choose whether you want to respond from here or here or here or here. And that itself was a very, very liberating experience, because suddenly you're starting to see things that you've never seen before, because your general response is the automatic response that you have. So emotion is one way to get there. There can be other ways to reach that there also. But I feel unconditionality is really something that can help us move beyond the conditioning or the belief systems or something that's limiting us. So I always say unconditionality is not so much about the other person. I mean, they would benefit, which is more like a byproduct, but it's really opening up a whole different world for yourself. And then that 42-day program eventually led into another week of a more intense program much later, which was more like processing things in silence. So I did about 5 days of silence, and I just sat with myself, and a lot of things came up. I mean, I think when we just sit quietly, we give it space to emerge. But the work that I'd done before helped me sit with all of it. So I didn't need to run away. I could look at everything that was coming up. And it's still not a process that I feel has ended. I still every now and then come up with something that I've never seen before. And I'm like, oh my God, wow, I'm still operating from something like that or like this. But now I feel I just have the gratitude to be able to see something. I may still not have answers, but I think it's good to see where we function from, and then sit with it till an answer decides to appear. So with that, when he did the 42-day mandala with a lot of other people that he's worked with, I decided to offer my gratitude with helping in whatever way I could.
I think first we can give a bit of context of what mandala is from our side.
Sure.
All of us three attended mandala.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the not the full course, but
Yeah, partly.
partially.
And I was part of the organizing team with Megha and 3 other YouthLink members. So from our side, in the beginning, it was just a 42 days program where experts from all over the world would come and share the knowledge with us. And it ended up being very different. So that's you're gonna explain.
I didn't know either. I was
Explain
surrendered.
But no, that was the pitch in the beginning, but it was true.
It was, yeah.
There was Nate Higgins who came and did a few presentations about, how do we call this?
Energy expert.
Yeah, he was
Meta crisis.
He was an energy expert who talked about the meta crisis and how the world is going to change in a few years that was going to come. There were some psychologists with who we didn't have official presentation to the community, but we had very nice talks with them, and very interesting people in general. Um, yeah. So I think the first question we had on our list was, what did you expect from the Mandala program? Like, what did you think it was going to be?
Well, I thought it was going to be a lot like what I did, which was going to be like the content plus the emotional holding, but it was very different. So after a point, I kind of surrendered to it because I realized that it was, and also it could be different for when you're doing it individually and when you're doing it collectively. So I surrendered to whatever was unfolding and decided to support in the best way that I could. And there were a lot of, like, we had issues with places and we had to move, and there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scene.
Lots of logistics.
Yeah, that most people didn't know, but there was enough grace and everything was kind of falling in place, but it needed time and attention. Yeah. But it was also wonderful to have all of you because
No, it was wonderful to have you.
yeah, I mean, it was wonderful to be together, because I think again, it's the same thing that I was saying about this experience of when we bring ourselves and as a collective that becomes amplified. And I think that was also the experience while organized. Like, we were not fighting, there was no resistance to each other, there was no, there was, we were all arriving at some points with ease, and there was respect and love and sharing, and I think it was, I felt very safe because I was the only one who was not part of the Youth Link team, and I was meeting all of you all for the first time in that sense. So it was, I felt very welcomed, very received, and supported, and everybody had energy and they were running around, and so it was wonderful that way.
That's true. We weren't fighting in front of you. We waited for you to leave the room.
But you were doing the Youth Link thing. But with Mandala, we were pretty sorted.
Yeah, I remember just before we start the mandala, just the organizer, the team asked me to do the Tai Chi in the morning, and I asked what kind of program is this, and they explained about just the one day, the schedule, and chanting and Tai Chi and the presentation about the youth link, the overview. So I thought it's just the donor, the just long tour program for donors. But, ended up it was different, completely different program.
Your phone is off. I can't see the question.
But just with what you have shared, even if you was like, yes, part of like the logistic and the organization, you was there also like as participant, and what it have bring you like new that the previous program that you did with Mandala, what's the Mandala like have bring you like as a new thing or new learning or new understanding?
So I think the first thing for me was that because I was already living a lot of that in my daily life, it was a lot more practical experience. So whatever was being shared was something that I could connect with my life, and that kind of amplified the learning a lot. It was also a high pressure environment in terms of time. I do tend to take a lot of quiet time, spend time with myself and all of that. But with Mandala, there was no space. So for almost a month and a half, I was active in a certain way, which I had not kind of experienced in a very long time. So that opened up a very different possibility in me that I had kind of forgotten. And of course, it was wonderful to meet all these people from all over. I learned a lot. In a way, I feel it also opened up my world because since I've been in Oroville, I've been very into Oroville. Like, I've not really connected with the outside world so much in the last 7 years. I've not felt like doing projects outside of Oroville. And in a way, I feel it was also what was needed for me with whatever I was doing in life at that time, or working with myself. But this was again like a switch to the next stage, where, you know, I felt like the universe was almost like, you're ready for a little more opening. And so things kind of started opening, and I felt also like I'm ready to now reconnect with the world. There were some things where I was stuck in terms of not being able to let go, you know, some pain from the past, or some things which had moved but not fully. A lot of those things got released also, so I feel a lot more freer in my being. I think there were a lot of insights about human interaction, and how my fear or my lack of safety in the outside world, or in the interaction with the outside world, can limit me and limit others. And yet there's a deep desire to live a free, full life, and to allow other people to also experience that. And how is that possible? How can one bring that? Where does the safety lie? Or does it lie in time and space, or our interaction in terms of how we keep that in time and space? Or there's something deeper that we connect to, and it transcends those kind of logistics. So there was a lot of letting go of like these fears and control. The structure thing that I was talking about was also a deep learning from this. Like, how do you just create structures that are more, that are deeper and rooted, more like seeds? And I think the biggest takeaway for me was the way the idea of impermanence hit me, because I think that unlocked a lot of things. I could accept that everything is impermanent, and I do still feel that there is something that holds. I don't know what that is yet, but I realize I have to find safety and stability in the dynamic movement of life. Nothing is stagnant. My state is not stagnant. Your state is not stagnant. Today we'll interact like that. Tomorrow we'll be in different states. We'll have a different interactions, but yet something holds us together, and yet it's constantly moving. So this phrase dynamic equilibrium is what you're kind of seeking constantly, and trying to find safety and stability and peace in that is a game changer for me.
It's funny you said that. For you, mandala really opened you up more to the outside world and what's happening there and what you can do. For me, it was really the opposite, where before I was really trying to see, oh, what's happening there, and can I do something? No, I can't, but I can still feel anxious about it, because why not? And yeah, mandala really brought me back to here now, and what can I do here? So it's funny how it brought us in different ways. Why was it 42 days long? I remember I asked this question in the beginning, and I thought maybe because, you know, if you type on the internet what's the answer to the universe, it says 42.
He
So
said that all the
maybe
time.
that is.
I don't know, but if you actually see in spiritual and religious context, 40 is a number that exists, like in Christianity, in Hinduism, in various there is a 40. There's a significance to 40. From my understanding of what I have learned with, it also has a physiological impact, which is basically the lining of the digestive system and the enteric nervous system maybe is changed in 42 days, and that is where our habits and beliefs are
Can change
in the body. So when you do something for around 40 days, then there's a possibility to change that completely from the body, because whatever we experience, whatever we understand, everything, like even our life experiences, are stored in the body. So if you want to change anything, unless it goes into the body, unless the change happens from the body, it is going to be an incomplete change. So 42 seems like a duration that one can use to change something more permanently.
And did you felt a personal resonance a new like routine or daily life, some habit who have changed because of the program in this sense?
I think for me, it brought up an insight into a lot of things that were not working and were part of my routine. Um, so, for example, one thing that I dropped immediately after Mandala was timetabling. So, I instead of doing like shorter appointments, I started dividing my day into like 2 or 3 big chunks that allowed me freedom to connect with myself to do whatever I was doing. Because, say, for example, I'm writing, and if I tell myself, okay, I'm going to sit and write for an hour, there's already so much time pressure, and then nothing flows. But if I divide my day into like the morning and post lunch and evening, then you have space to let things come, for things to move at its own pace without pressure, without and I think that changed a lot in terms of uh, the quality that I was experiencing in the tasks that I was doing, but also if I just wanted to take some time, breathe, take a break, there was, I mean, the stress and the tension of it kind of reduced a lot. So I think I kind of kept bare minimum of like fixed things, and took away everything else to really actually respond to the present, and what I was feeling in the moment, but also still have some kind of semi structure to not also become very scattered. So then these dividing my day into 3 chunks kind of started making a lot of sense. So that was a big shift for me, for sure, and I'm still navigating that because there's also demand from the outside to respond to need for appointments, this and that. So how do I balance that need versus my need to have space? And when I have space and I don't have time pressure, then there's a lot more that flows freely, at least for me. I mean, we may all have different needs, but for me, I think to just have that space, like breathing space, is to sit with something actually. Even if I want to paint, to not have this pressure that I have to do something within an hour, but to just take the morning, see what comes, sit with it. Sometimes it takes half an hour, sometimes it needs 2 hours, but to give it that kind of breathing space to emerge.
Yeah, it can be something easily like done in a way to try to drop the our agenda like that. I think I will try.
Yeah. Yeah, and it still gives you a certain grounding, no, to like, okay, I have 4 hours before lunch to sit with something, but it's not so scattered also, so it gives you a little bit of like a raft in a sea, but also not like an enclosed this thing, so you find a little space with everything, but you're not swimming in the sea either.
User, yeah.
Do you have like one particular moment that you really liked that really marked you in Mandala, like in a positive way?
I think there were a lot of beautiful moments in the mandala with the people. Sometimes I miss that in Oroville. Actually, that is one thing that I feel like I have not experienced so much, like a larger collective. Um, a lot of my friendships are one-on-one. Work also is not really working as in a team per se. So I miss that, and I grew up with that. I grew up in Surat, and Surat is a very community-based city. Gujaratis are a lot like that. So I sometimes miss that, and I think when we had the mandala and we were all kind of together all the time, and you could just show up at Aditi Griha and have dinner and just hang out. Um, I really appreciated having that, and I kind of still miss it now. So that was a very beautiful experience also for me, to experience a collective that was in synergy.
And on the flip side, did you face any like challenge during Mandala or any negative experience? Something that you remember?
I think most of my struggle was with organization, um, because everything was just like nobody knew what we were doing technically. Like we were like, okay, the people coming, there was 42 days, we're going to do things together, but it was all changing and moving, and so at some point I was like, where are we heading, what's going on? So there was this lack of clarity somehow that felt a bit of a struggle. And secondly, I felt like there were too many elements packed together. So there was the mandala, there were the talks, there were the workshops, there was this, there was Auroville. So there were too many elements, and somehow I kind of felt there was a lack of balance there, which also resulted, maybe at least in my experience, a lack of enough space and time to process everything that was happening. And that was actually the reason why I said, okay, I need to pick 2 or 3 things that I can actually do justice to, and actually drop things that at the moment I wouldn't have the bandwidth for. So it'd be good to kind of have a lot of things in place before we start, so that there's enough space and time to actually respond to crisis if any, but also just have some space to breathe and be present.
Do you think that a second edition of Mandala could happen one day?
I think we should definitely do this. I think it is something that would definitely benefit a lot of people. And I say that mainly because, there's a lot of talk of consciousness and change and alternative lifestyles and all of that in the world at the moment. There are tons of workshops and practices and all sorts of things. But I think what really, for me, is a bullseye with this program is this understanding that stability and acceptance is needed at the base before you can talk about change. Because unless you have that, you are only going to fight more with yourself, and in that state there's nothing that can change. And I don't think anybody really talks about that so much. Everybody's wanting to change, everybody wants to change tomorrow. There's so much information out there, Instagram, or you just go online, and it's all about don't do this, do that, don't be like this, be that. But there's a reason why I am what I am. There's a reason that I am responding to things the way I am, and unless I can sit with that and I can create, like, if someone who has a broken leg, and if you're going to tell them, yeah, but you have to run to win a medal, they're not going to be able to run. It's just not possible. So can I first heal? Can I first sort out my foot before I can even start training to run? And it's something like that. I feel that it's very important to nourish and nurture yourself, and then just accept yourself, because everything that we are is because of a reason, because something happened, because something we experienced, and so there's no judgment to it, but we need to at least start seeing those things before we want to change anything. Not just my behavior, not like I'm smoking, I need to change that. Why am I smoking? Can I go 5 steps behind and see what is the need that smoking is fulfilling? And for me, that is a big gift that mandala or this content has to offer, I think. So I definitely feel that this is a very beautiful point that mandala has to offer. I think it opens up space for love, for ourselves, for others, and that itself can be healing. I have worked with a lot of people from this knowledge, and I do feel at the end of the day that the only thing I try to do is accept them and offer love, and that itself triggers a whole process within them of change or acceptance or just being with themselves. So I think it would be very helpful to a lot of people to stop running, chasing, and just sit with themselves for a moment and be okay with whatever we are. And we are worthy of everything, of all the love that exists in the world, of all the beautiful things that exist in the world, and to give that experience to people, actually. And then nothing needs to change, and change will happen on its own. So sure, we should do this.
I think like it sounded like a great conclusion, but if you have more questions,
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah, me too. I think.
Thank you to have been our first
Thank
guest
you.
for the community.
thank you for coming.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful. I mean, Madhu told me that, we were thinking about it and we were thinking, who could we be comfortable with? And we thought of you, and I'm like, this is a gift. I mean, this is exactly what I'm
She thought of you.
Aw. And we haven't really even interacted so much. So this is a big gift. I think that this is a big feedback for me in the work that I'm trying to do. That can I just create a space of, with myself and others for that matter, a space where people can be at ease and be themselves, and there's nothing else that they need to do or be. So thank you. That was a very beautiful feedback for me in my journey, and very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.